So, estimates suggest that since 2004, more people have arrived in Britain each year than arrived in the entire period between 1066 and 1950. The transformation has been so off the scale that native Brits are now a minority in several major cities. Nigel Farage argued in The Telegraph today that after the Rochdale/Gaza by-election, everyone can now see that mass migration is ruining Britain. Religious sectarianism taking over small Lancashire towns aside, the idea that immigration is good for the economy is also looking shaky. The IFS warned only last week that Jeremy Hunt's £100 billion tax jump is a direct consequence of record net migration. So look, we're worse off per capita, our public services are crumbling under the weight of rapid population growth, we have a catastrophic housing crisis, and foreign conflicts are playing out on the streets of Britain. Is mass migration ruining this country? Well, here to unravel all of this is former Treasury advisor James Price, who is currently at the Adam Smith Institute, and Robert Bates as well, who is the research director at the Centre for Migration Control. Chaps, thank you very, very much. I'll start with you, Robert. Do you think that mass migration is ruining Britain?
Oh, hands down it is. Absolutely. Every metric possible, whether it's culturally, societally, housing, public services, infrastructure. Now we're seeing, the biggest decline in GDP per capita on record. It's successive periods of decline, and people aren't seeing any of the benefits that we have been promised.
OK, it's quite hard to come back to that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a head-to-head, perhaps we're agreeing in different kinds of ways here. I think we can imagine a world in which migration would be amazing for Britain, right? If the people coming over are all genuinely really high in human capital, a.k.a. they're smart, they're hardworking, they've got great skills, they love this country, they love its institutions, they're desperate to come over here and become British, then immigration would be a total unalloyed good. As it is, it's not that. I don't think that it's completely terrible in every single way. Again, there are lots of people that come who want to become British, who want to work here. Maybe they've got historical, cultural ties from Australia, Canada, America, or they just love it and want to make it their home because they like the business environment and things like that. And I think we've got to get the balance right of quality over quantity.
OK, Robert, your views on...
So the fact is, obviously, you can imagine a system where everyone skips around holding hands, dancing around rainbows, and that sounds perfect. But the fact of the matter is now we've seen for 20 years that system just isn't viable. It doesn't exist in the minds of White or Mandarins, as I'm sure you're well aware. The system itself has a tendency towards mass migration as the solution to most problems, and that involves the importation of cheap labour that just doesn't benefit the productivity or the value that's added to the economy.
Yeah, so I suppose, with respect, then, the reality that you've envisaged just doesn't and will not ever exist.
Yeah, I think that we have to be careful of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. If we just pull up the drawbridge entirely, that's not going to fix all of the problems that Rob's rightly pointed out. It's not just immigration, it's not just new people coming over here. A lot of people who are second generation are here and still have lots of these problems, cultural problems. It's not that everybody who voted for that idiot in Rochdale is a first generation person who's just got themselves a passport and a vote. So it runs deeper than that. And in the same time, pulling up that drawbridge will lose incredibly talented people, the people who will found amazing companies, who will fall in love and marry Brits, right? My other half is American. I want her to be able to stay, and I think that she loves this country and her family come from it, all that kind of stuff. So there's a balance to be found there.
But let me put this to you. If Nigel Farage is saying that mass migration has ruined Britain, I mean, there are still a heck of a lot of Brits. Are you not proud of anything in this country anymore,
Oh, absolutely. No, I still love aspects of the country. I love the history, the countryside, all those things that were brought up on, the poetry, the plays and things like that. I just feel like where we're heading as a society now isn't as one. As Nigel points out in his piece, society through this mass migration has become siloed. We're seeing communities now congregate around one another, and there isn't the same integration and the same, not to coin a term, but British dream.
Is it salvageable then? So if he's saying, if we're starting with the Nigel Farage premise that it has ruined Britain, can we now reverse that? So
look, we've had 20 years of a pretty drastic experiment now, and I do think that as a result we are going to have to take pretty strident views. We can't really be carrying on with the hundreds of thousands, 200,000 is somehow acceptable. I think we need to have serious conversations about what level is sustainable and doesn't compound the problems that we are currently facing.
Now, this will be my next point, which is that we are not realistically ever going to find ourselves in a situation where that happens, are we? Therefore, it has ruined Britain.
No, I think ruined is too fatalistic. I think that you can see if we have control of a decent education system, right? Schools actually have got a lot better in terms of what they're teaching kids, and kids are learning more. They're coming out of schools with actual great skills.
Why don't people want to send their kids to state schools?
Well, actually, state schools have got a lot better, right? So it used to be 2/3 were good or outstanding. Now it's over 90%. I'm definitely not able to afford to send them to a private school, but there are great schools, right? And so you go in there and then you start teaching good British values. Like Rob, I agree that I'm not a relativist. I don't think other countries are just different. I think that this country is better, but that we've been held back from explaining that to too many communities. As the PM said today, the Prime Minister said today, people are just being side by side. We need to be living together. And when we start explaining the rule of law, that capitalism, that Shakespeare, all these things are better than the alternative, then there's still hope.
People would make the argument that, hey, look, we are culturally enriched. Would you agree?
No, and I don't think anyone seriously in their heart of hearts believes that, to be perfectly honest. I think that's the kind of thing that you might hear in a pub in Islington, but I think if you went anywhere else in the country, you'd be hard-pressed to find the argument that the kind of things that we're seeing, for instance, in Rochdale, is somehow for the benefit of the country.
Was there a moment in time, I mean, you might disagree entirely with that, I don't know, but was there a moment in time where we were in that kind of squiffy little period where we were culturally enriched and everything was nice and it was all right, and now actually that's tipped and we've got Eritreans fighting each other with sticks in places?
Yeah, I think there definitely been bits where we probably all should have woken up a lot more. I think it was the late 1980s when there was a fatwa put out against Salman Rushdie. Yeah. English is his third language, right? An amazing writer, chose to make England his home. It's much better at writing than most Brits are in English, and that people were calling for his death on the streets. At that point there, we could have nipped this in the bud and then maybe gone to that sort of skipping around with rainbows and all the rest of it. Didn't happen then, didn't happen after 7/7 either, and I think we're pointing at there's one particular set of cultural differences that are quite tricky. It's not Islam. Islamism, however, is a big problem, and that plays into culture as well as it plays into social issues as well, as the Prime Minister pointed out. Yeah,
look, and we are going to be having a massive conversation about that a little bit later on in the show as well. Huge issues, certainly, when it comes to Islamism, which Rishi Sunak did actually stand on the steps of Downing Street and mention today. Again, begging the question, why were you so bullish with Suella Braverman? And also, maybe you got it slightly wrong with Lee Anderson. But anyway, there we go. Look, thank you very much, both of you. Great stuff there. Former Treasury Advisor James Price, who's currently of the Adam Smith Institute, and Robert Bates as well, is the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Who do you agree with? Is migration ruining Britain? Johnny on X says, you only have to see what it's like on our streets and towns in big cities, and the fact is, there's an alien culture and religion now dictate our politics. Well, strong stuff, Johnny. Some people would disagree. Jan says, uncontrolled immigration is ruining Britain. Too many and too fast. Our infrastructure cannot cope, and it's causing deep divisions. Ian says, not a lot of shades of grey in this inbox today, by the way. Yes, Patrick, and anyone saying it isn't is either lying or have their heads buried in the sand. Right, well, there we go. 94% of you say that migration, mass migration, I would like to point out, is ruining Britain. 6% of you say it isn't. So the GB News viewers have spoken. But